Are we live? Well, good morning. And before you ask, the reason for these scars is I fell off my bike. So very silly. I'm old enough to know better, but, overgrown school kid. Anyway, this morning, our programme is entitled Election Deception. And unfortunately, Caroline has now been booted off of Facebook, so she can only broadcast on Facebook via this sort of medium by sharing here. But you can catch up with her on her YouTube channel, which is Caroline Stevens Seeking the Truth. Now, I think Caroline and myself, we've both really made an effort to go out of our way to not vote this morning. So good morning, Caroline.
Good morning. Thank you for having me on your show again. And yeah, well, the weather is not conducive for voting, that's for sure. It's raining here again.
Same here. It's horrible here. Well, it looks as if it's about to brighten up. I'm just looking out now. Yeah, there's a slight.
Apparently it's very bright in Yorkshire. So you see, it's God's own country. They've got the sunshine and we've got the rain in the south.
Yes. Do you think we should need a passport to go to Yorkshire? I mean, I wouldn't be allowed in because I'm a spineless southerner, or I might actually have a sort of a day pass or something like that. Bloody southerner,
I've got dual nationality.
Yes, well, I mean, we don't put gravy on our chips and things like that. We're very civilised down here.
Well, I didn't put gravy on my chips either, but anyway. So this is the election day, 12/12/2019, which in numerology is 333. So it's a very auspicious day, and of course we've moon, haven't we? At 12 minutes past 12. Was that it? Was that overnight? Was that
I don't know. I don't know about the full moon. I've got one of these sort of moon type electronic temperature things, and that's downstairs. So I don't really want to leave the studio and go downstairs. But no, I think that, numerology, I'm very much into numerology, although I don't know that much about it. My father was very much into it. And he actually, he foretold a lot of things, especially during the war, because World War II was all 3 6s and 9s. Right the way through was 3 6 9, 3 6 9, continuously. And he predicted about 18 months beforehand the exact date of D-Day, which was due to be the 5th of June, 1944. And he said, no, it'll be the 6th of June. And when they were going over to be the first, shall we say, cannon fodder nobody thought they would survive. My uncle said to my dad, "You're not bad, you was only one day out." And he said, "No, it's going to be delayed 24 hours. And just as he said it, over the loudspeaker came the voice. They called it they didn't call it D-Day then. I think they called it the second front. The second front has been delayed by 24 hours. And he was spot on.
They don't call Freemasonry a 33rd degree having certain importance for no reason at all, do they?
Precisely.
And actually, that's where I'm going to lead into us talking about election day, if I may, because I just was getting involved in a heated discussion with a guy of senior years who does a lot of court work. And he was saying, why was I not voting? And I said, well, he knows the court system is totally corrupt. And I said, well, he said you still have the right to a democratic vote. And I said, well, how do you work that out? I said, because the people who get chosen by the political parties, they're chosen by the elites of those political parties. They're not actually, your candidate is not chosen by you. That's the first point. So, for example, somebody once said to me, and I stood for UKIP in 2015, because I truly believed they were the only party that were determined to leave the European Union. I thought they were the bee's knees, of course, but I was a bit concerned about forcing some sort of manifesto on people at the doorstep, because I thought surely true democracy is about giving the control to the people, not the other way around. And I understand later, I don't know if this is true or not, but the majority of the men who stood for UKIP were actually Freemasons. So going back to the 33, we have all these secret societies which are involved heavily in the political scene. So if you've got to be a Freemason, it would appear, to be chosen, and you've got to be a Bilderberger from one of the Illuminati families, you've got to be this, you've got to be that. And then that person is presented to the public. And of course, they have statisticians working out which person should go in which constituency, which is why you get this, this talk of being parachuted in to an area that you have no affiliation to. I mean, Tony Blair, wasn't he in Sedgefield? And, did he have any links to Sedgefield at all?
I don't know. But I know that the local MP here came from somewhere in South London and had no links here at all. And it's a very safe Conservative seat. I mean, a chimpanzee could put up for the Conservative Party where I live, and it'd probably get in with flying colours. The other parties, there are very
few. Well, I was going to say there are very few MPs that represent the red team or the blue team that actually necessarily were born or worked in the constituency. But starting off in UKIP, it's not so straightforward because the people were looking for somebody different, and I wasn't affiliated to my particular constituency either. I live 23 miles away to its nearest border. So that goes, that's a disadvantage if you're in a new political party. But, new political parties, so you've got the election system, which is rigged right from the start. The people do not choose independence for a start. I think was it only one or two? There've only been one or two MPs that have been truly independent. Was it Martin Bell, wasn't it? And the guy in the white cream suit in
That's
Cheshire?
Right. Yes, but I often wonder whether he was a member of the brigade. I don't know.
Well, this is it. The Freemasonry is big in politics.
And it should be any public servant, it should be illegal to be a member of any secret organisation. You can be a member of a secret organisation providing you're not a public servant, because surely it's a conflict of interests.
Of course
I can't really see that. And I wonder, do you know whether old Nigel Farage is a member of the brigade?
I think most of them in UKIP were, or are even, because once you're a Freemason, it's like having a puppy for Christmas. I think you're pretty much a Freemason for life, especially if you get higher up in the brigade, because you can't really leave then. They know too much about you. It's a secret society.
Well, precisely. And I think that in a truly open society, as I say, a public servant, it should be very open. I mean, if a person wants to go into a room with members of the same sex and carry out creepy rituals, that's entirely up to them. But surely that sort of mentality wouldn't be fit to, shall we say, represent people. And that's what they're doing. They're representing you. So I just think it's absolutely, it's ridiculous. And I think we are probably secretly ruled by Freemasonry, because I found, particularly in my profession in architecture, I worked in an office once where there was only 3 of us that weren't Freemasons. And I actually got a Masonic handshake once because I probably scratched my nose or something, and he might have thought I was a Freemason. I got this sort of tap on the wrist. Funny handshake.
They test you out, don't they, to see if you are sometimes, because they don't know. They can't possibly know everybody in every lodge. But there's no doubt about it. I mean, even in show business, they have a show business lodge.
Water Rats, I think it is, isn't it? Because I know Bob Monkhouse was, what's his name? Rick Wakeman. There's loads of people, and that comedian, I can't think of his name now. He, and you notice they're never short of work. They've always got plenty of work. And
they've always got support somewhere along the line, and people will always defend them. Especially, I've got a friend on my timeline, and he's in the police force, and he will defend, and he'll say, "Oh, I never see anything," you know. And I think, no, but you've actually given an oath. You've sworn an oath. You've sworn an allegiance to the dark side, whether they understand that or not. That's the spiritual side. But on the physical side, yeah, I mean, a lot of people I know have joined it because they're movers and shakers. They want to move and shake in not in a conventional way. And, you know, I know personally that it's very difficult to move and shake these days without being one of a club like Common Purpose. Anyway, so we're looking at the general election. I would say it's an unauspicious day. So, you know, we still are faced. Nothing has changed. We still have politicians procuring children in places like Australia for nefarious activities. You know, we still, you know, the politicians that covered up on behalf of Ted Heath. And of course, we did have the investigation by Mike Veal, who said that, you know, in today's money, Ted Heath would have been interviewed, interrogated, whatever. You know, these people have been the victims of these serious crimes, have been discredited for so long, discredited and twisted, and you know, the words twisted in the mainstream media. And actually, it's quite refreshing to see the media expose the prince. Well, one of the princes, shall we say.
Could that be some
I just hope they go on a roll, quite honestly, because, you know, with one prince, how many more princes could be linked?
Well, I often wonder whether these, shall we say, things come up because it's a kind of distraction. And I'm wondering whether the prince, that, you know, the case with him, with Jeffrey Epstein, etc., that is a distraction. And I often wonder that because I know that I think it was Barry Trower was saying that most people in power have been compromised. They are, shall we say, they've got something against them. And I think Ted Heath, although I can't show you the black and white evidence, it would appear obvious to me that he was put in a kind of blackmail position, that if you don't take the country into what was then the common market, we'll expose your paedophilia. Now, I haven't got evidence of that, but it all seems to point in that direction. And I think a lot of these...
Well, that's why it's appropriate to talk about it on today, because this is classed as a Brexit election. And, you know, there's all this publicity on Facebook saying vote for the Tories. Well, hang on. Ted Heath was a Tory. If you can't get your brain around the fact that all these political parties are run by the same committee of 300 and the global elites, you know, you've got the committee of 300 where you've got the royal family on there. You've got Queen Elizabeth II. You've got Prince Philip. You've got Prince Andrew, Prince Charles, Prince William. And you've got, who else have you got? Mervyn King, Mark Carney. So we've got this committee, and Tony Blair, and David Cameron, and George Osborne. So you've got Tories, Labour, and the royal family. And they're all in it together. So why these people keep pushing for voting Tory? I mean, you and I, it's a contract. People don't understand that if you sign a contract, you've made a commitment. And in this particular case, it really is a because this is a contract where you're actually saying whether you, and this is, people find this very hard to grasp, you're actually allowing for this tyranny to continue. And I wonder if it's something that they put in the food, because the people I know in their 70s, 80s and 90s, they are the ones who are saying, I'm not voting. So why is it that the older generation understand this? From a gut feeling in their heart, there is no point. To lemmings continually jumping off a cliff because all the people in the media, I mean, every newspaper that I picked up on Sunday, I picked up about 6, every single one promoted the Tory party. And yet, watching television yesterday morning on Good Morning Britain with Piers Morgan, they had the story of Boris Johnson hiding allegedly in a fridge, not wanting to come out, not wanting to be interviewed. And there was an altercation between one of his staff and the journalists from the TV. Piers Morgan made, he opened the question up and said, why would anybody vote for either Corbyn, Swinson, or Boris Johnson? Why would they? Because, of all the lies that have been told. I mean, Boris Johnson made apparently some unfortunate comments about a child lying on the floor in a hospital. Yes. And then Robert Buckland was on Good Morning to defend Boris. Robert is one of our local MPs here. And Robert made a comment saying it's been a long campaign. I'm sure he did. Robert, if I got this wrong, please pick me up on this. But Robert, this has been one of the shortest campaigns in history. This has been just engineered. This matter of leaving the EU into the long grass until after Christmas, because nobody is going to be focused after tomorrow, after the results. It's all going to be forgotten about until Parliament goes back in January. And even in the papers, I mean, before I went to Perth for a couple of weeks to interview people, Boris Johnson had said at one point, he said, I'm not going to have a drink until after the general election. 20 minutes later, he's pictured with a pint. So these are the people. So we have to think, look, big picture. Why are we looking at these individual spiritual beings? It is a battle we're up against with the elites. And it's about time we stopped pointing the fingers at each other and working together for a common cause. Because
I agree with you.
It's Brexit. What is Brexit? This guy on email, he said, well, at least Boris Johnson and Jacob Rees-Mogg are Brexiteers. I said, what is Brexit? I said, at the end of the day, they're all globalists. And the word, in my eyes, leaving the EU, right? Because Brexit means nothing at all. Its definition is it's not a word. It's a non-word. It was made up by the mainstream media after we voted to leave. So what bit of do they want to leave the EU? We've got the European Court of Justice that is about to make a decision on the 19th of December regarding our pension schemes. We have the Tories who signed the Marrakesh Declaration middle of December a year ago now.
Oh, yes.
They signed the Marrakesh Declaration, which is this. This is, for people at home, this is what the map of Europe will look like. This is showing people coming up from North, West, East Africa, and they are looking at possibly 200 million people moving up into Europe. 200 million. And there are 28 countries. On a group chat this morning, there was a guy there. He's from near Hungary. Well, he's on the Hungarian border. And he said there are numerous migrants hiding in the trees at the moment. And I pity them because they'll have come from warmer climes than the Hungarian forest at wintertime. And they won't be staying there. So I guess the Hungarians perhaps are not so fearful because they are all heading west.
Unbelievable. But it's how they've got away with it. This is what's amazed me. It's a bit like the boiling the frog. If you metaphorically put a frog into boiling water, it jumps straight out again. But if you put it into lukewarm water and then gradually increase the temperature, it'll eventually boil. And this is what they've done. They've done it of a very long and very slow process. And if you see films, there are films on the YouTube where you can see the Club of Rome and all the they were talking about what's happening now as far back as the 1960s. So it's all been very, very well planned. And it's really it's well, it's not an artificial, it's a real crisis of their creation. Because let's face it, if people are stressed or in crisis, they can't really think very clearly. And I can't understand why in France we've got the yellow vests. Now, okay, they've been infiltrated, but they are doing something. And they are endeavouring to make, and they're still going on. But over in this country, it was a sort of, it rained and everybody went home, and about half a dozen people turned up. And the same in Ireland. What's wrong? And I put it down to, in France, there are more of a rural population, and people from farming stock are generally think for themselves and are not really, they're very independent people, maybe. But when you look at what's happening in Hong Kong, well, they're not rural, although I think that's to do with the CIA and something to do with China. Those, the problems in Hong Kong. But why is nothing really happening? Why are people just sitting back in this country in Ireland, just sort of, oh, what can you do?
There is a yellow vest movement in the UK, but they haven't seemingly. Again, it's about this Brexit, which I really detest using that word, because none of the politicians, including Farage, have actually specified what we should be doing. What we should have done was 3.5 years ago repeal the European Communities Act of 1972. We should have been, but you see, we haven't. They just basically, all the politicians are just lying, and they're just covering up the fact. We're just sitting here hoping that the EU will give us some crumbs, when we actually have the power ourselves, the sovereign power of a nation state, taking back our nation, regardless of what the United Nations wants, says, or does. We have the power to do so. And the United Nations is a wing of the same bird as the EU. Our councils report directly to the United Nations, and Parliament is a degree. It's a bit like the royal family. It's a tourist attraction. That's it. It's a tourist attraction.
I agree with you, because he who pays the piper calls the tune. And let's be very, very straight on this. I've said this many times before. Governments do not rule or run countries. The people who pull the financial strings, such as the usury scammers and the multinational companies who come under the usury scammers, they rule countries. Civil servants run countries, and governments are there to take people's minds or distract people from realizing those two first facts. That's what government is. I mean, you might as well have Sooty and Sweep representing you, because that's about how much use they are. But really, when you look at it,
they've got the same man's hands under both puppets. That's a really good analogy, right, to be honest.
That's right. I mean, it's just a complete and utter farce. And I've noticed that, Boris Johnson was on local radio the other day, and I tuned into this as the weather forecast, and I actually usually turn it off before the news, because I find it just depressing to hear this load of propaganda. And Boris Johnson, everything people said, oh, the NHS, it's terrible. Well, we're going to pump loads more money into this. And he was telling people what they want to hear. Not the truth, but what they want to hear. That's all he's doing. When I was mayor, crime rate dropped by 15 to 20%. And all. But statistics, you can twist them around however much you want. Because
look at this guy. Well, look at Boris Johnson. His strapline is, let's get Brexit done. Well, his deal is not vastly different to Theresa May's. But then I was watching Anne Widdecombe stood on a platform, and Professor Gwyneth Prince, interjected to something that Anne Widdecombe had said. And he said that Boris Johnson's deal was quite different to Theresa May's. And Anne Widdecombe, quick as a flash, brilliant lady, said, No, he's just turned it around about the opt-ins. He's not actually said we're no longer going to opt into, I don't know, some defence. No, to PESCO. It was to PESCO. Yes, we haven't signed up all the paperwork. This is where it's a play with words. This is where it gets quite working on the dark side. No, he hasn't signed the PESCO deal, which is why I've never actually, I don't think I've actually ever said that. And I know people on Facebook have been castigated for saying that. But we've done so many deals with different countries. It's just like a patchwork quilt. So it's just playing, it's semantics, really. You know, this emphasis of getting Africans out of Africa and coming into Europe has been predominantly because of the UK and France signing, I think, the Sandhurst Treaty. But nobody will talk about the Sandhurst Treaty, and there's not very much meat on the bones on the internet. This is a treaty where they'll go in as EU peacekeepers. You know, under the Sandhurst Treaty, the UK lent or gave, who knows, 3 special helicopters to go into Africa with the French troops. So we're in there with these troops. And of course, we know that Africa is full of great commodities, and we know the global elites want those commodities out of that ground.
Well,
it just so happens that we have to go in there and bring the people out.
That's right. That's right. Because when you look at it, a good civil servant and a good politician, the art of being a good politician is to be seen to be doing, but not exactly doing anything. And that is a good politician. And I found this when I worked alongside the civil service. A good civil servant, they are seen to be doing a lot when they're doing absolutely nothing. And that is their art. I mean, when you look at Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn. Now, Jeremy Corbyn has lost it. I don't know where his brain is. He's listening to a 16-year-old schoolgirl and a television presenter who's reading the script and telling us that the world's going to end in 10 years. So he wants to, and that is to promote UN Agenda 2030, which is Marxism, where we'll probably be wiped off the face of the earth because they think that humans are bad for the earth. So they want to wipe out about 90% of us. Nothing's being said about that. And when you look at these different parties, their manifestos, like you've got the Green Party, nothing about 5G. Not a word. What about these chemtrails spraying over the top of us? Nothing about that. No. Nothing about this fake man-made global warming. No. And if you mention it to them, they sort of go, "Oh, you're a tin-hat conspiracy theorist."
Well, there's no mention of all these millions of Africans waiting in the bushes in Hungary. There's no mention of the Marrakesh Declaration. I mean, the thing is, they can easily argue that 5G is fine, but it depends on they can alter the waves, the strength of the waves, so they can make it. I'm sure they can make it fine. Keep it fine, but they can also increase it. So that's where they can get you there because this is like the opt-in, opt-out with European defence, the PESCO, that they can play with words. You've got to physically opt back in. So we've got a government that, you know, people actually, and I'm going to say hello to John now, because John is the person that I have been communicating with, and he says we do have democracy. So how do we have democracy? Going back to the politicians, they're chosen from a pool, a selected pool. And as I say, I was one of the rare people who, not being female, wasn't a Freemason, and not from an elitist family. That was rare. I was a new kid on the block, and who ever thought that UKIP were actually going to get lots of MPs into Parliament anyway? So you've got Serena Rothschild before she died. She actually chooses the leader of the Conservative Party. So
Really?
People think that the members of the Conservative Party actually get to choose their leader. That's what they sincerely believe in, but they don't know how that voting is actually conducted. And of course, it was certainly rigged against Andrea Leadsom, although she is part of the Privy Council. She's part of the Privy Council. So it's a case of what do you choose for? They're all they're all the same. They're all part of the City of London clique. You know, you'd have to name. I think Jack was it Frank Skinner? Is Frank Skinner the Beast of Bolsover? I'm having a memory lapse.
The Beast of Bolsover. Yeah.
You know, he's one of the rare politicians who's come through from the factory floor, I believe, and says it how it is. You know, you've got Barry Gardner, be it Labour as well. He, you know, this is the problem with having manifestos and having a party line and having a whip system, because anybody watching this from outside the UK may not be familiar with the fact that both the House of Lords and the House of Commons have a whip system in place. So you've got a guy in an office, and if you want to vote the way you feel your constituents want you to vote, but that goes against the party line, then there's the great chance is that the whips have got a compromising picture of you or some compromising information, so they will use their room, just like Tim Fortescue from 1974, I think it was. He revealed all on BBC, and you know, would you like these pictures shown? And then away you go. You know, it's only MPs, for example. There's one in Leicestershire that got involved in a newspaper sting. Cash for, you know, he's got questions to answer about rent boys taking cocaine cocaine parties. Was it cash for questions on passports or cash for passports and all this sort of thing? But these people then become too ill to face any further action. If you conducted yourself in a similar fashion for a small company, your boss would say, okay, so there might be some sort of disciplinary you go through, grievance, and then you'd be out the door, because this is just flagrant, you know, conflict of interest here.
Well, you're right. I mean, there's an investigative reporter, I've seen a film of it, who's got evidence, allegedly, of Boris Johnson going to these wild parties with Russian oligarchs, because the Russian oligarchs actually ran the former Soviet Union, and when the Berlin Wall came down, they just moved from the east to the west, and that's why they want a new Soviet Union in the west. And so what's he doing going to these parties, allegedly? Now, he's an investigative reporter. He says he has all the facts there, but I will not say 100% until I've actually checked it out fully myself. So all I'm saying is, this reporter, I won't mention his name, he believes that, you know, he's got a lot of evidence for this. But again, I'm not dirtying the copybook because I want to check it out myself. But when you look at Cyril Smith, how did he get away with it for so long? How did Jimmy Savile get away with it for so long? All right, if they're that way,
Jimmy Savile, now that's a good one. Sorry, I interrupt, but you've got Prince Andrew, who gets called to a meeting with Prince Charles about his friendship with a convicted paedophile, Jeffrey Epstein. But then you've got Prince Charles. His best friends included Jimmy Savile and and some bishop who's been caught for some misdemeanors with children, I believe. So I can't remember the guy's name, and I can't honestly. And Charles wrote an affidavit about this guy, and I'm just thinking, well, what is he calling? You know, are we talking about pots and kettles here? Why is Charles linked with all these depraved people?
That's right. Don't you get some sort of inkling? Because they say, you know, they judge people by your friends. And, you know, why would you want to hang around with paedophiles and say, oh, I didn't know that. Surely, come on. Pull a, you know, I mean, I would have thought the police would have gone straight in to interview him. But when you look at all the lies that are being told, when you go a little bit further, now, if you or I told a lie, there's like white lies, where when I was a kid, you know, you would tell a white lie, which was sort of a mild one. I mean, the one I heard was a poor chap that was shot down during the Battle of Britain, And the chap that rescued him out of his Spitfire, he said, "Is my face," because he's a very handsome chap, "is my face burnt badly?" He said, "Not a mark on it, mate. Absolutely perfect. You're okay." And then when he got to the hospital, he found out you had been badly burnt, but that chap told a lie so as to raise his spirits and keep him alive. So that is okay in that situation. But if you or I told a real blatant lie, it would be on our conscience. But with a psychopath, they don't have a conscience. So they can just roll the lies out left, right, and centre. And I really do believe that the people that do get to the top in politics are generally, I wouldn't say they're all psychopaths, I don't know, because I'm not a professional in that area, but they all seem to have that kind of, they can lie and lie and lie. I mean, look at Boris Johnson, he just rolled them out left, right, and centre. Tony Blair did. Absolutely, and they seem to be proud of it. But if you've got a conscience, you can't actually, you might say one line, you just think, you'd have a sleepless night over it. And I think they've just got to be like that. And I think they're controlled. And as for voting, now in the late 80s, I was around Hertfordshire. Do you remember Naughty Cecil Parkinson with Sarah Kay, that affair in the late 80s? I don't know, you're probably not old enough to remember it. But
there was a love child involved, wasn't there?
That's right. Now, he's dead now, so I can actually say this. I'll be very brief. He was canvassing for the, I think it was 89, 88, sometime around that time, election. And he was hated. Now, Potter's Bar in Hertfordshire was true blue. It's conservative throughout. And he was walking down the high street, and I went down there in my lunch hour, and nobody wanted to speak to him. People were sticking their fingers up at him, and that's after the Sarah Keys affair broke. And I felt a bit sorry for him. He was walking along the road, and people were just walking away, and he went to shake someone's hand, and they just pushed him away. They didn't want to know him. And the general attitude on that high street in that lunch hour was they absolutely detested him. But he got in with an increased majority. And at that point, I thought, it must be rigged. All those people, I mean, there's people slowing down in their cars, sticking two fingers up at him and swearing at him. It was horrendous. But how did he get in? How did he get voted in? I don't know. And I really
we had something similar a few years ago here. A safe Tory seat, a gentleman, wife who has cancer, and goes off with somebody else. And it's not for me to what people do behind closed doors. And but it wasn't. I guess it's a case of he was still doing his job. What concerns me mainly is the fact that the conflict of interest while they're conducting their business. That's the thing that concerns me. Yeah. It's they're doing the deals that benefit themselves and their chums, and handing away taxpayers' money to ex models. It's not their money to hand out. And so and also to be sent information about Corbyn mixing with people from the IRA. Well, look at the other side. You've got people in the Tory party who mix with gangsters. So it's like, as Piers Morgan said, just to wrap this up, I guess, Piers Morgan said on TV yesterday morning, what are you going to choose? Liar 1, liar 2, liar 3. Where do you go from here? There's no point in voting. So that's really my point. My point is, so people will say, what's an alternative? Well, it's not to, post your ballot today. That's not what is the answer, because otherwise you're just going to have more of the same. But what is to come will happen. But we've got potential pension equalization coming next year. We've got all these bits of the Lisbon Treaty that nobody seems to be asking our politicians at the hustings. No one's talking about the Lisbon Treaty. Nobody has said we're going to pull out of the Lisbon Treaty. Nobody has said we're going to pull out the Marrakesh Declaration. And I'm afraid that I do think that things are going to get a lot worse for the people of Great Britain before we can get enough people to wake up and pull ourselves back out again.
I agree. I mean, Tony Benn, I didn't really care much for. He said the best ideas and the changes come from outside Parliament. And I think he was spot on there. And I think it's going to come, and I hasten to add, peacefully and within common law, which is loss or harm, so we don't harm anybody, but peacefully and lawfully change things from outside Parliament, because I think the voting system now is a complete waste of time. And the way I look on it is I like what they've done in, I think it was Hong Kong, where they are not that keen on 5G. So someone went along with an angle grinder and just cut the post out. That to me is positive vandalism. You know, I'm against vandalism, but I think that is the sort of what I call positive vandalism. Speed cameras, well, let's face it, if it was for road safety, I worked for a very short time in road engineering, and I know they can design roads where you can't go over 30 miles per hour. But of course, that doesn't include raising revenue. But I think we can sort of wrap this program up on this note. Please come on again, Caroline. And remember, you have to see this on Caroline Stevens Seeking the Truth on YouTube. You'll be able to see it on my YouTube channel, which is Eric Von Essex. And tonight I'll be talking to Mark Windows.
Okay, well, I don't know. I don't know him, but you know, if you show him this video, maybe we can I can chat Windows sometime.
Please do, because we're actually looking at what's happening in local councils, and he's done a lot of research into it.
Oh, brilliant!
Interesting. I think you two together would do a pretty good show. So I'll drop a word, shall we say? And he's on all the W's, Windows on the world.net. If you go into Google and put Windows on the World, you'll find lots of information about the Sears Tower, but you won't see anything about him. So remember, it's Windows on the world.net and Caroline Stevens Seeking the Truth on YouTube, and my one, which is Eric Von Essex on YouTube. And there's also BitChute. I'm the same name on BitChute. Are you on BitChute, Caroline?
Not yet. No, I'm not.
Okay, well, we'll leave it until later. Thank you very much for joining us today. And thank you very much, Caroline.
Thank you. And thanks to everybody at home for watching.